Digicel boss Denis O'Brien waived about $20 million in cash dividends from the company last year. The owner of the Daily Mail newspaper is considering a bid for the struggling U.S. internet company Yahoo, and the Coffee Industry Board is investigating fraudulent activities involving the use of fake email addresses. All that and more on JNN's Global Trends Financial Report. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We begin with local business. According to the Irish Times newspaper, Digicel boss Denis O'Brien waived about $20 million in cash dividends from the company last year. He has promised Digicel's lenders he will not take further payments until business improves. Mr. O'Brien made the commitment as he led a series of meetings with Digicel Group bondholders in London, New York, Boston, and Miami after providing them with details in late February of a decline in revenues and earnings. Digicel Group's earnings before interest, tax depreciation, and amortization fell 5% to between $1.1 billion and $1.2 billion for the 12 months to the end of December last year. While Mr. O'Brien is foregoing quarterly cash dividends, it is understood that they are rolling up and may be paid at a future date. Revenues also fell during the period as the mobile operator in the Caribbean and South Pacific was dogged by currency weakness against the US dollar and rising competition in some of its main markets. A Digicel spokesman, in response to questions from the Irish Times, said the decision to hold dividends is not surprising, as Digicel is investing between $300 million and $400 million in cable and high-speed broadband. And the Irish Times said the bondholder roadshow was the first since Mr. O'Brien last October pulled an initial public offering of Digicel shares, in which the company was seeking to raise up to $2 billion. The money was to help lower Digicel's debt, expand its operations, and list on the New York Stock Exchange. The group blamed volatility in U.S. and global markets at the time. Now, according to the Irish Times, Mr. O'Brien and his management team used the investor meetings to pitch plans to improve business and earnings, particularly in Jamaica, Papua New Guinea, and El Salvador during the current calendar year. And the government says it wants the local tourism sector to record an annual growth rate of 5%. Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett wants this achieved over the next 5 years. Mr. Bartlett says this will be done by identifying new markets, products, investments, and partnerships, as well as embarking on human resource development. The Coffee Industry Board is investigating fraudulent activities involving the use of fake email addresses of employees of the entity, as well as local and overseas licensed coffee stakeholders. The entity issued an advisory stating it is involved in the probe with the assistance of the relevant authorities to identify the perpetrators and seek legal recourse. The Coffee Industry Board is advising persons to contact it as soon as possible to verify the authenticity of emails from its shipping department and advise overseas coffee importers of the fraud. It says this will eliminate or minimize the risk of fraudulent rerouting of funds and shipping documents. Now, Epley has signaled that it is considering raising additional capital. At an extraordinary general meeting last week, shareholders passed a resolution to increase Epley's share capital by 500,000 shares. Its chairman, Nigel Clark, says this gives the company the ability to increase its capital base and fund the expansion of its business. He disclosed that the options could include rights issue. Epley is a publicly listed investment company that manages a portfolio of loans, leases, receivables, and other forms of commercial credit. Now on to international business. The owner of the Daily Mail newspaper is considering a bid for the struggling U.S. internet company Yahoo. A spokesman told the AP news agency that discussions were at an early stage and there was no certainty a deal would take place. The Wall Street Journal, where it was first reported, said the Daily Mail was in talks with private equity firms about an offer. Now, Yahoo is under pressure from shareholders to turn itself around. The activist hedged fund investor Starboard Value recently called for the replacement of the entire board at the loss-making company. Now, Tata Steel is beginning the formal process of selling its loss-making UK plants, inviting interested bidders to submit their offers. So far, the only company to have publicly expressed an interest is Liberty Steel, owned by Sanjeev Gupta. Thousands of workers in England and Wales risk losing their jobs if a deal cannot be struck. However, the BBC understands that a city investment firm will agree to buy Tata's Thorpe plant today. The U.S. oil benchmark touched $40 a barrel for the first time in 2 weeks today, shaking off early losses as the dollar faded and hopes rose for an agreement this week among sovereign producers that will begin to reduce the global crude glut. The benchmark U.S. crude contract was up 2.2% at $40.60 a barrel on the New York Mercantile Exchange, while the global Brent contract was up 2.3% at $42.87 a barrel on the ICE Futures Europe Exchange. Both contracts were in negative territory in early trading today, but surged with the beginning of the U.S. trading session. Now, analysts said there appeared to be little direct reason for the gains and said it was likely a combination of a softening dollar, hopes that U.S. oil production and inventory data this week would build on declines last week, and that Sunday's meeting of producers in Doha would yield an agreement to freeze output levels. Now, a softening dollar can drive oil higher as it becomes cheaper for traders using foreign currencies. Oil prices have surged more than 14% in the last week, including a 6% gain Friday, as U.S. Energy Department data last week showed a surprise decline in U.S. supplies, prompting bearish speculative traders have closed out short sales against the market. Meanwhile, investors have become increasingly optimistic that Sunday's meeting will yield results. In today's trading session, the JSE market activity resulted in the trading of 38 stocks, of which 16 advanced, 10 declined, and 12 traded firm. Among the winners were